American sailor has been injured aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea, a development that comes at a particularly tense moment in the rapidly escalating confrontation between the United States and Iran. According to officials from the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet, the incident occurred during routine flight operations on March 25 and has been classified as non-combat related. The sailor, whose identity has not been publicly disclosed, was promptly evacuated from the vessel and transported ashore for further medical treatment. Authorities confirm that the injuries are not life-threatening and that the individual is currently in stable condition. While the incident itself may appear minor in isolation, its timing is significant. The USS Abraham Lincoln has increasingly become a central figure in the broader conflict, symbolizing both American military presence and vulnerability in the region. Operating in one of the world's most volatile maritime zones, the aircraft carrier has been repeatedly referenced by Iranian officials as a key target in their ongoing confrontation with the United States. The border conflict, now entering its fifth week, has evolved into a complex and multifaceted crisis involving not just direct military exchanges, but also strategic messaging, economic pressure, and high-stakes diplomacy. What began as a series of coordinated strikes by U.S. and Israeli forces on Iranian military and nuclear infrastructure earlier in 2026 has now expanded into a sustained and unpredictable standoff. Since those initial strikes, the situation has escalated dramatically. Missile launches, drone incursions, and naval maneuvers have become frequent occurrences, transforming the region into a high-risk conflict zone. Both sides have demonstrated their capacity and willingness to project force while carefully avoiding actions that could trigger a full-scale war, at least for now. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has repeatedly claimed responsibility for attacks on U.S. assets, including assertions that it has successfully struck or damaged the USS Abraham Lincoln. These claims have been firmly rejected by U.S. officials, who insist that the carrier remains fully operational and has not sustained any significant damage. However, regardless of their accuracy, such claims serve a strategic purpose, reinforcing Iran's image as a capable and defiant adversary willing to challenge American military dominance. In recent days, Iranian military rhetoric has grown increasingly assertive. Officials in Tehran have announced the launch of coastal cruise missiles targeting U.S. naval assets in the region and have released footage purportedly showing these strikes. While the authenticity of such footage is often disputed, the messaging is clear. Iran is signaling that it possesses both the capability and the intent to confront U.S. forces directly if necessary. Senior Iranian commanders have issued stark warnings, emphasizing that any American vessel operating within range of Iranian missile systems would remain under constant threat. This messaging is not just aimed at Washington, but also at regional and global audiences, highlighting Iran's strategic position and its willingness to leverage it. At the heart of this confrontation lies the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most strategically vital waterways in the world. This narrow passage serves as a critical artery for global energy supplies, with a significant percentage of the world's oil shipments passing through it daily. Control over the strait, or even the perception of control, provides immense geopolitical leverage. Iran has repeatedly emphasized its sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, framing it as both a legal right and a strategic necessity. Iranian officials have suggested that their control of the waterway could serve as a guarantee for the enforcement of any future agreements, while also warning that continued hostilities could disrupt global shipping. The implications of such disruptions are far-reaching. Already, reports indicate that maritime traffic through the strait has declined sharply as shipping companies reassess the risks of operating in the area. This has contributed to rising oil prices and increased volatility in global energy markets, underscoring the broader economic consequences of the conflict. Despite these risks, the United States has shown no signs of scaling back its military presence in the region. On the contrary, Washington has moved to reinforce its position, deploying additional troops, including Marine units and airborne forces, to the Gulf. These deployments are intended not only to bolster defensive capabilities, but also to signal America's commitment to maintaining its strategic interests. At the same time, diplomatic efforts are underway, albeit under challenging circumstances. U.S. President Donald Trump has put forward a 15-point proposal aimed at ending the conflict and restoring stability. The plan outlines a series of measures, including a temporary ceasefire, the dismantling of Iran's nuclear facilities, and strict limitations on its ballistic missile program. Additionally, the proposal calls for Iran to cease its support for regional proxy groups, including Hamas and Hezbollah, and to halt attacks on energy infrastructure across the Middle East. A key component component of the plan is the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which Washington views as essential for stabilizing global markets. However, Iran has rejected the proposal outright, describing it as one-sided and unacceptable. Tehran has instead presented its own set of demands, which reflect a fundamentally different perspective on how the conflict should be resolved. Among Iran's key conditions are a complete halt to all military actions by the United States and Israel, guarantees that such a conflict will not be imposed again in the future, and compensation for damages incurred during the war. These demands also include recognition of Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz and a comprehensive end to hostilities involving its regional allies.
The tone of Iran's response has been uncompromising, signaling a broader shift in its strategic posture. Rather than seeking immediate de-escalation, Tehran appears focused on redefining the balance of power in its favor. This position was underscored by statements from senior Iranian figures who delivered pointed and unequivocal messages regarding the country's stance.
We frankly and unequivocally declare that no situation will ever return to its former state until it is our explicit will to do so. This statement reflects a clear rejection of any return to the pre-conflict status quo and emphasizes Iran's determination to shape the outcome of the confrontation on its own terms. The same official continued with an even more direct warning. Our first and final word from the very first day has been, is, and always will be this: no one will ever come to terms with someone like you. Such rhetoric highlights the depth of mistrust between the two sides and suggests that the path to any meaningful agreement will be long and uncertain. Despite the public exchange of harsh statements, there are indications that behind the scenes, diplomacy is still taking place. Pakistan and Turkey have emerged as key intermediaries, facilitating communication between Washington and Tehran. Both countries have expressed willingness to host talks, reflecting their interest in preventing further escalation. However, these efforts face significant challenges. Iranian officials have publicly denied any willingness to negotiate with the current U.S. administration, citing past experiences and what they describe as a lack of trust. At the same time, U.S. officials have continued to emphasize the importance of dialogue, even as they maintain a strong military posture. Adding another layer of complexity is the position of Israel. Israeli officials have reportedly expressed skepticism about the prospects for a negotiated settlement, raising concerns that any agreement could limit their ability to conduct preemptive strikes against Iranian targets. This reflects the broader regional dynamics at play, where multiple actors have their own strategic interests and priorities. Within the United States, President Trump's approach to the conflict has evolved over time. Initially, his administration adopted a hardline stance, calling for Iran's unconditional surrender. However, recent statements suggest a shift toward a more nuanced strategy that combines military pressure with diplomatic outreach. Despite the shift, Trump's rhetoric has remained forceful. In a recent statement, he warned that the United States would continue its military operations if Iran failed to engage seriously in negotiations. We'll just keep blowing them away. This statement encapsulates the dual-track approach being pursued by Washington, offering a pathway to de-escalation while simultaneously signaling a willingness to escalate if necessary. Behind the scenes, another factor may be influencing the U.S. strategy: the sustainability of the war effort itself. The conflict has already consumed vast amounts of military resources, with billions of dollars spent in a matter of weeks. This rapid expenditure has raised questions about the long-term viability of sustained high-intensity operations. One of the most pressing concerns is the supply of rare earth elements, which are critical components in modern military technology. These materials are essential for the production of advanced weapon systems, including precision-guided munitions, radar systems, and electronic warfare equipment. Without a steady supply of these materials, the technological edge that underpins modern military capabilities could be compromised. This is particularly significant in a conflict where precision and technological superiority play a crucial role. The United States remains heavily dependent on external sources for rare earth elements, with China being a dominant supplier. This dependency introduces a strategic vulnerability, as geopolitical tensions could potentially disrupt supply chains and limit access to these critical resources. As a result, the conflict is not just a military confrontation, but also a test of economic resilience and supply chain stability. The interplay between these factors will play a key role in shaping the trajectory of the conflict. On the battlefield, both sides continue to demonstrate their capabilities and resolve. The us Abraham Lincoln, despite being the subject of repeated threats, remains operational and continues to serve as a symbol of American military presence in the region. At the same time, Iran's actions and statements reflect a strategy aimed at leveraging its geographic and strategic advantages. By focusing on key choke points like the Strait of Hormuz and emphasizing its missile capabilities, Tehran is seeking to counterbalance the technological superiority of the United States. In the diplomatic arena, the gap between the positions of Washington and Tehran remains wide. While proposals and counterproposals have been put forward, there is little indication that either side is willing to make the concessions necessary for a comprehensive agreement. Meanwhile, the global implications of the conflict continue to grow. Energy markets remain volatile, shipping routes are under threat, and the potential for broader regional escalation looms large. The involvement of multiple actors, each with their own interests, adds to the complexity of the situation. As the conflict continues to unfold, the central question remains whether diplomacy can succeed in preventing further escalation. The stakes are high, not just for the parties directly involved, but for the international community as a whole. For now, uncertainty prevails. Both sides remain entrenched in their positions, and the path forward is far from clear. What is certain, however, is that the situation remains fluid, with developments occurring rapidly and the potential for significant changes at any moment. The world watches closely as this high-stakes confrontation continues, aware that its outcome could have far-reaching consequences for global security, economic stability, and the balance of power in the region.